Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Lunar Display, Mac Stadium, and Kensington. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vidici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. Hi. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Still recovering from my HomeKit experiments a little bit. I mean, I before we dive into today's episode and to the meat of it, I wanted to give everybody a little bit of an update because I know both of us were having various issues with our Circle cameras that we put on the beta, HomeKit secure video program. And after you described last episode how Sylvia's settings had changed automatically without her doing anything, I thought, I wonder if that's what my problem is. And I went and looked because you wouldn't expect that settings just change, but they do sometimes, and it turns out that's what my problem was too. Now, I changed mine back to where I wanted them to be, and that they've stuck this time. So I actually upgraded my second camera yesterday afternoon as we record this, and so far, so good. My fingers are crossed. I also took one of the cameras, the camera that I had, at least as while I was doing all the setup, I just put one of them like in a windowsill, pointed out the window, and that was no good because it was pointing out not just, at kind of my front yard and front door, but into the street, and it was picking up people walking by and cars and all sorts of things. And now I actually mounted it above the door looking straight down, and boy, those Circle cameras have such a wide angle of viewing that even that, I'm still picking up some of the street here and there, in the corners, but it's much better. So I don't have, maybe when the neighbor a couple of doors down goes and walks their dog and they walk through the sidewalk in front of my house is in one corner of that image, and I'll get an alert then. But so far so good. It's working pretty well.
When settings have a life of their own, you have a problem.
Yeah. Another setting in home, I guess I should know that this was a risk because there's another setting in home that turns off on me every so often, which is the personalized requests with the HomePod. And I don't know if this happens to you, but I'd say it happens to me. It only happens like maybe every couple of months, but it just happened the other day, and I thought about it. And I think that this has happened to Stephen Hackett too, but it just turns off for no reason. So I'll make some serial request to my HomePod to play some playlist or personalized radio station or set a reminder or whatever it is, and I get the response back that it can't help me with that. And then I go into the settings and I realize that both HomePods in my house have had their personalized requests turned off, which it's a strange bug. I don't know what's causing that.
You know what's been happening with one of my HomePods? For the past few weeks, one of them, the one in the hallway, consistently goes like offline in the sense that when you open the home app, it says in red, account with an exclamation point. And when you long press it to open the settings, it says that it's been, it's unable to connect to my iCloud account. So I log in with my iCloud account again. And after a couple of days, it goes back to showing the error message, like account with the account in red and the exclamation point. And I've been trying to power cycle the HomePod, turn it off and on again multiple times. It keeps happening. It's using the latest version of iOS for the HomePod. I really don't want to reset it. It's a whole thing.
I know.
I really don't want to. One of my hopes is that it'll just fix itself at some point.
It's pretty bad when you get to that point where you just say, well, you know what, I'm just going to let this sit here broken until it fixes itself.
Yeah.
But I've been there too with that.
Yeah. So it just says account for whatever reason. I don't know.
Well, one other thing I want to mention about HomeKit, which is a tip that I got from Aaron Pierce, who makes Home Run, and we talked about his apps last week too. And I had mentioned kind of offhand that I didn't like how my garage door has a security feature which doesn't let me just shout to my HomePod to open the garage door because, you might have a garage that's attached to your home. It might be an entryway into your house. Someone could shout, I suppose, through the window really loudly. You have to have an unlocked device. So it has to either be an unlocked iPhone or it has to be your watch. And that's not a huge hassle, but when I set this up originally, I was kind of disappointed because I really wanted to be able to just, as I'm walking out the door, walking through the kitchen, shout to the HomePod and have the garage door opening by the time I put my coat on.
I think I know where
Right?
this is going. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So what Aaron suggested, which I should have thought of, but it's kind of brilliant. It's Homebridge. You can set up those garage door openers as a switch, so they just come on and off with a command, and that bypasses the security of the garage door that's built into HomeKit. Now, I wouldn't suggest that for someone who does have a garage that's attached, but my garage, my cars are in there, but there's not a lot in my garage that I worry about someone coming in and stealing, and I'd like the convenience. So I haven't tried this yet, but I may just do that.
Yeah, you can. There's a bunch of plugins for Homebridge, and for those not familiar with it, Homebridge is essentially a server program that you can run it on a variety of devices, from Windows PCs to a Mac terminal, to a Raspberry Pi, to a Docker instance, I believe. And what you can do is you can go to GitHub and search for Homebridge plugin, and you will find all kinds of accessories that are meant to either sort of retrofit HomeKit compatibility for accessories that do not officially support HomeKit, like my LG television, for example. Or you can find all kinds of new software-based, quote-unquote, HomeKit accessories that are just plugins. And one of the most popular ones is the fake switch. So what the fake switch does is it's a little program that runs in your Homebridge server, and it creates a fake outlet that you can turn on and off all the time. And the idea would be that you can associate custom actions with a switch, so that when you invoke your assistant, you can just say turn on whatever, and you have the convenience of a single HomeKit command, but you can perform any actions you want. A really popular one, a really sort of popular flavor of this idea is creating fake switches for web APIs, so that you could issue a command to say turn on or turn off, and maybe you run a Zapier trigger or an IFTTT trigger.
Sure.
I've seen people do that. So the fake switch is a great idea, John. You should do it.
All right, that's really interesting. It turns out these web APIs, who would have known? They do all kinds of things, and
It can be useful.
yeah, they can. That's the way pushcut works too, which we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Lunar Display. Lunar Display is the only hardware solution that turns your iPad or Mac into a wireless display. Luna sets up in just seconds and works instantly over Wi-Fi or a USB cable. And unlike Sidecar's limited 10-meter range, Luna works wherever your Wi-Fi network can reach. It also works in 3 different modes: Mac to iPad, Mac to Mac, and headless mode. With Luna's newly launched Mac to Mac mode, you can use an older laptop as a secondary display for your primary Mac. I've been doing that with the 2015 MacBook Pro that I have. I've got my Lunar Display hardware connected to my primary Mac Mini, and I'm using the 15-inch MacBook Pro from 2015 as a second display. And Lunar Display supports all sorts of older Macs because it works with macOS all the way back to version 10.8. which is a really terrific way to repurpose an older Mac. The headless mode can be used with a Mac Mini, for instance, which is what I do with an older Mac Mini I have that's running as a Plex server. I often access it to see what's going on with my Plex server from my iPad from anywhere in my house. And of course, there's Mac to iPad mode, which turns your iPad into a complete extension of your Mac with full support for external keyboards, the Apple Pencil, and touch interactions. It literally turns your Mac into a touch screen device. Lunar runs on a proprietary technology for video called Liquid, and it was originally engineered for professional digital artists. And what that means is that it has stunning image quality and virtually zero lag. App Stories listeners can get an exclusive 15% discount on the Lunar Display by going to lunardisplay.com right now and entering the promo code STORIES at checkout. Again, to get 15% off the Lunar Display, go to lunardisplay.com and use that promo code STORIES at checkout. Our thanks to Lunar Display for their support of the show. All right, Federico, I want to dig into our latest installment of Pick 2. And this is maybe a little bit of a cheat pick, too, because instead of you and I each picking a different app, we picked the same app.
Well,
Just on
it is technically different, though. Like
it is. We're talking about totally different, binaries if you want to get technical about
Yes.
it. But we're talking about the Mac and the iOS versions of Reader, which is the RSS client that you and I have both been using a lot lately. It got a big update. Oh, I guess the Mac version came out in May of 2019, and iOS was sometime around there too. So it's gotten major updates in 2019. Turns out it's just about my favorite Mac app of 2019. I really love it, and I've been using it a lot, especially with some recent updates that make it work even more seamlessly with iOS. So I want to dig into these. Where do you think we should start with Reader?
Well, I think we should start by saying that Reader is one of the sort of the indie apps that has been around for the longest time. If I'm correct, I remember first writing about Reader within the first year of Mac Stories, either in late 2009 or 2010.
Oh, wow.
It's always been created and maintained by Swiss developer Silvio Rizzi. It's been around forever. It's always been one of the most polished, elegant, and fast RSS clients for iPhone. And Reader has a bit of a particular history in that it used to be a Google Reader client back in the days of Google Reader when Google had an RSS service. And then when Google Reader shut down, Reader went through a bit of a transitional phase in that it's almost like it disappeared for a couple of years, and it dropped off everyone's radar. I know that a lot of people have kept using Reader, even though it looks like it had been abandoned by the developer. And then Silvio made this huge comeback this year with Reader 4 for the Mac and iOS. And I've been talking to Rizzi behind the scenes about the shortcuts that he's using in Reader for iOS. We're going to talk about those in a few minutes. But he basically explained to me that those couple of years that is sort of and maybe he could have done a better job of communicating this with customers, but that's not our place to say. But the idea would be that he spent a long time essentially rewriting the entire Reader 4 code base from scratch. And he did it before Apple officially opened up Mac Catalyst. So there's a lot of shared code between Reader 4 for Mac and Reader 4 for iOS, but there are still, one is an AppKit app and the other is an iOS app. So there are two completely different, AppKit and UIKit, two different apps. But the idea would be that the shared code base means that Reader 4 now supports the same services across the Mac and iOS for connecting to your RSS service of choice. It uses CloudKit as the foundation to support the Read Later account, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So everything, the same CloudKit code on both platforms, the same multi-column approach between the Mac and the iPad. And this complete rewrite took the developer a long time. And as is often the case with indie apps created by a single individual, things can go wrong. And, as a developer may also have a family and other responsibilities. So with Reader, you get that kind of experience. You get the pros of a very opinionated app made by a single person with a very particular taste and opinions on how reading RSS should be, but you also get the cons and the risk of maybe the next update will be out in 2 weeks, maybe it'll be in 6 months. So once again, I know because whenever I talk about Reader, I get tweets from people saying, aren't you concerned that now that you're using Reader again, maybe you will not see an update for a long time, maybe the developer will disappear again.
Right.
I can't know, right? That's the point. I can't know for sure.
Right, exactly. And you just have to kind of accept that for what it is going into it, I suppose. And it's kind of that background that you just explained that made this app sneak up on me on the Mac, especially because it hadn't been updated in a long time on the Mac. And then there was a beta, and I tried out the beta for a while for the months leading up to when it was finally released. And I didn't stick with it very long because it had a tendency of crashing randomly in the background. And RSS is a major piece of what I use, part of my workflow of everyday, work at Mac Stories to get things done. And so I really couldn't afford to have my RSS client crashing in the background. It is rock solid now. I don't know what the issue was back then, but because I kind of abandoned the beta at some point, and then the app dropped without a lot of pre-release hype or communication, I lost track of it. I mean, it was at a time right before we went to WWDC, and we were very busy, and it just kind of fell through the cracks. But what really brought me back to it, I think, was once the iOS app both got updated and then started to do some of the shortcuts things that you are going to talk about. Then I took another look at it, and I realized this is a way for me to greatly simplify the way I find things to read online. Because before this, I was using a different RSS clients on the Mac and iOS, and I was also using Read Later in Safari, and it was a weird combination. I was using Read Later in Safari primarily for things that I found outside of RSS, whether it was on Twitter or maybe you sent me a link through messages or whatever it happened to be. I would save those into reading list in Safari as a way to park them to read later or to put in, say, the Club Mac Stories weekly newsletter, that kind of thing. But so I had some things stashed there. I had some things in Instapaper, and then I had everything else in two different RSS clients. And it was too many places to check. And I think one of the things that I've found the most useful with the combination of the Mac app and the iOS app and Reader is that it's all fully integrated and I can get everything into it. And the thing on the Mac I guess before I get into what is kind of the secret sauce that makes this work so well for me, I just want to, emphasize that Reader really gets the basics right because the sync is really fast and it's got a level of customization in the UI that I love because I can tweak the margins, the line spacing, the font size, the way things are sorted and displayed, all those kind of things, how the images are sized, all those different things that make it work the way I want to read when I'm sitting at my Mac. And that's true on iOS too.
But it's not too much, right? Like all those settings. Like I feel like there's other apps that really, and I mean, it's awesome that they provide you with dozens and dozens of settings that you can tweak and to play around with the smallest detail in terms of like how the parser looks at an article and how different levels of text are displayed in a story. But I feel like Reader is an example of providing the just right amount of features and personalization options. Like I have freedom, but I don't feel paralyzed when I look at settings and I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to tweak here? I have no idea. It's just the right amount.
Yeah, the problem when you have a lot of settings, when you have settings overload, you get to the point where you're not really sure what's going to change when you change a setting, and then you have to kind of change it, look around, see what you did, decide whether it's any good, and then go back. It does become a little bit too much. The other thing about Reader that's fantastic is it supports a lot of services. It supports all sorts of different RSS sync services. I'm currently running Feedbin as an experiment to see how I like it compared to iNoReader, which I had been using for 2 or 3 years before. One of the things that brought me to Feedbin, and I mean, I'll admit, you mentioned you were using it, so I went and took a look at it. And one of the things I'm using it for is they have a feature called Actions, which you can set up in the web app, where you can apply certain rules to certain feeds. And so I'm doing, for instance, I'm searching certain feeds for the word sponsor, to see who's sponsoring various websites.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, it is. It's one of the things I do. And they get a star, and every so often I go through, look at the starred ones, see if there's any there that I think would be good fits with Mac Stories, and then I use the action extension to send it into reminders for
Do you need to go to marketing school for that?
No, not at all. So that's one of the things I've been using. Plus, it has a Twitter integration, which is kind of helpful. I don't follow a lot of Twitter feeds through RSS, but there are a handful I do, like some of the Apple executives, because they're usually linking to something that Apple's doing. So I do that as well. The other thing worth mentioning, I think, is that there's a lot of great indie app third-party integrations with Reader. You've got Yoink and Good Task, Drafts, Keep It. It's kind of a who's who list of apps that we cover at Mac Stories. These are all really fantastic apps that a lot of our readers use. There's also integrations with Instapaper and Chrome, and then all sorts of Apple apps, Notes, Reminders, Mail, Messages, AirDrop, Reading List, and then open in Safari. So I really like all those integrations. I've been using... I don't use it with the reminders and mail very often, but I do use Reader with Notes an awful lot because I keep notes with ideas for, music I want to try or video games or like the sponsor stuff, all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And then, probably though, the one integration that is my absolute favorite is Reader's own Read Later service. So what it does is you can use it directly from inside Reader. You can take an article that you find in one of your feeds and save it for later. And then there's a separate section where you can find those articles to read later, offline, online, whatever. But what I use it for the most is that there's an action extension, and you'll get into this a little bit with iOS because there's a similar thing there, is that I can be on a web page or in Twitter or wherever I happen to be, and I can take that link and I can drop it, use the action extension from the share sheet on the Mac and send it directly into Reader. And that way I've got kind of a comprehensive list in one place of things that I either want to read later or that I'm saving to link in the newsletter every week, all that sort of thing. And it makes it really easy. Now, especially when I do the link list in Mac Stories Weekly every week, I just go right through that thing top to bottom over the last 7 days and look and see if what is interesting in there that I've saved during that period. And then I just, kind of open those up in tabs and read through them and prepare the links. So I don't have to kind of, swap back and forth between things like Reading List or maybe, a favorited tweet or wherever else I might have stashed an article. It's all always in one place, which I find just absolutely great. Plus, on top of that, customizable shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts, and great gestures. I've got a gesture set up so that all I do is I swipe left on the title of an article, and it goes right into the Read Later section. It makes getting through a long list of articles very, very fast. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Mac Stadium, the only provider of enterprise-class Apple Mac infrastructure as a service. Did you know that Mac Stories runs entirely on a Mac Mini at Mac Stadium? It does, and it has for years, but that's just one of a ton of different ways you can use the services offered by Mac Stadium. Today I want to tell you about something that's brand new from Mac Stadium that I think is going to be especially interesting to the developers in the audience. But I've also got a special deal that I want to tell you about that I think will apply to really anybody listening, so stick around for that. If you make apps for the Mac or iOS, you know that you need to build them with Mac OS running on Mac hardware. And unfortunately, that means for a lot of Mac dev teams, they're stuck using their own in-house hardware, whether that's Mac Pros or stacks of Mac Minis crammed in a closet. Here's the thing, though. It doesn't have to be that way. Mac Stadium has solved this problem by making Mac private clouds available in enterprise-grade data centers around the world. It's like AWS or Azure or even GCP, but for Mac hardware. And recently, Mac Stadium announced Orca. That's Orca with a K, which stands for Orchestration with Kubernetes on Apple. Orca allows Apple OS development teams to use container technologies like Docker and Kubernetes the same way their non-Apple peers do. Orca takes a standard Mac OS VM, puts it inside a Docker container, and then uses Kubernetes to orchestrate everything, all on Mac hardware. It may sound strange, but it's also really kind of intriguing, right? I mean, here's the thing. Mac Stadium has tested this and found that it's performed nearly 30% faster than other virtualization platforms in their beta. To learn more, just head on over to macstadium.com/appstories to get started with an Orca private cloud. And whether or not you're a developer, having a remote Mac server like the one we use at Mac Stories opens up a lot of interesting automation, other possibilities. And right now, you can get half off for your first 2 months of a new Mac Mini subscription with the code AppStories at checkout. Again, to get 50% off your first 2 months on a Mac Mini server at Mac Stadium, just go to macstadium.com/appstories and use that promo code AppStories at checkout. Our thanks to Mac Stadium for their support of the show.
It's funny you mentioned the read later service because it's exactly why I came back to Reader. So it's a very funny story in that, like, I wasn't looking for a different RSS client, but then a couple things happened. First, I checked out Fitbin. You were working on a review of the new Mac version of NetNewsWire.
Right.
And I really wanted to test the new NetNewsWire, but it only worked with Fitbin. And like you, I'd been using iNoreader for a couple of years, and I wanted to check out Fitbin, also because I thought it could serve as a good test for the new desktop browsing mode in Safari for iPad. And Fitbin has an excellent web app, works great on the iPad, works great in Safari, and I love the way that it looks. So I signed up for Fitbin and I started playing around with it. And at the same time, I was about to declare Safari reading list bankruptcy because I as time goes on, I save things to read later, and then I never get to them because they're actually not important. And eventually just, I'm going to wipe everything and start over again. Because I feel like when something is important, when something I really want to read or I really want to watch, I find the time for that. But often saving these articles and videos for later, it's just a placebo. Like, it makes you feel better. But if, for example, for me, if John Gruber posts a column on Dating Fireball, I'm going to read it right away. I don't save it to read later. But in any case, there are also instances of articles saved to read later that I actually want to check out. So it's a balance of both. But I realized, maybe part of the problem is me. I save too many things. But also part of the problem is Safari reading list and the way that it basically gives you no tools whatsoever to manage your list, to sort your list, to search your list. Like, you have nothing basically in there. You add things, you can see what's unread, you can see what is archived, but it's not really clear. Like, you don't have like different views for them. You just have a toggle that lets you cycle back and forth between read and unread. But it's been around for 5, 6, 7 years maybe, and it's been basically unchanged. Like, Safari reading list was launched years ago. Marco Arment was still working on Instapaper, so that gives you some context. I believe it was iOS 5 or 6, really. Like, it was a super long time ago. It was way before iOS 7. And it's basically been left there with no improvements at all. That's not great because I believe it's a great feature. It works in the background. It works from everywhere on iOS. Add to reading list, both on iOS and iPadOS, and the Mac is a native extension. You can save articles from any app that shares a link, and downloads happen in the background most of the time, at least. And you can see the original web page and you can use Safari Reader. It's great. But it's been left untouched for the past several years. And I thought, what would be nice? If I was using something like Safari Reading List, but with the very most basic management tools. Like, why can I not group articles by website? Like if I go to
Right.
Kotaku.com and I save a bunch of game reviews for later, or I go to Polygon and I save a bunch of stories for later, why can I not see, like, here's all the Polygon articles that you saved? Like, and just let me get to those quickly. And so I started doing some research, and I realized that Reader 4, which like you sort of passed by in the summer, like we went to WWDC and then I started working on my iOS 13 review and I sort of ignored the new version. I realized that it had gained a native read later account feature. And this is quite common amongst RSS clients lately. I believe Fiery Feeds supports a similar deal. And maybe Lear, although I'm not sure. I think the Fiery Feeds does. And so I started looking into this read later service for Reader. And this is not based on any other subscription based service. This is an iCloud based feature of Reader. And it looks like a separate account in the app, but it's actually based on your iCloud device settings. So the way that this works is really clever. It's based on CloudKit. So you get you get fast sync all across all of your devices, iPhone, iPad, and Mac. Articles can be saved in the background. So on iOS and the Mac, you have this extension called Add to Read Later. You save an article and it propagates across devices in the background, and it's downloaded in the background thanks to CloudKit, which is one of the perks of using a modern iCloud API, which, as we mentioned, Silvio Rizzi now is using thanks to the rewrite of Reader 4.
Right.
But the thing that I love, there are two things that I love here. The first one is it's very clear what the structure of your read later account is. It's very simple. You have unread, archived, and starred. It's basically like the same setup as an RSS client, but for articles that you want to read. And what you can do in the main unread view is you can browse your articles by domain. So you will see macstories.net, you will see Kotaku, you will see Daring Fireball, you will see the domain name and the favicon, and you can tap on an item and you can see all the articles belonging to that publication that you've saved for later. And this is exactly the way that I want to manage my reading list. Because yes, I may have a problem, but I feel like the software that I use to manage my reading queue should at least make it easier for me to manage my problem. And by being able to browse by domain, I have a very practical way of saying, I'm in the mood for reading about music. And I go in there and I can look for Pitchfork or Chorus FM or Billboard and know that I will find some music articles in there. Or I can search for Kotaku or Polygon or Vooks, and I know that I will see video game stories and so forth. So that's the first feature, like a very basic but sensible organization of your articles.
Yeah, I'll add to that, I guess, that at the very top, it has the full reading list. So if you want to see them just chronologically,
sure.
you can do that too, which is what I use when I am going through and making my link list. But I do like too that I can go through, based on the domain.
Yeah, you can choose. You can see all our items or go through by domain. And also, obviously, it's using the same engine as RSS items in Reader. So you get a fast interface, very fluid and smooth animations. I love how the gestures work in Reader for iOS. It's always been this way, but it feels like on the latest iPhones are the smoothest they've ever been. Super, like really amazing work in terms of how the app responds to touch and the animations and the transitions between views. And also, like, it's using the same text parser, so you can see full text stories in Reader with no ads, no extraneous elements, just text and images and sometimes videos as well. So it's super polished, super well done. And if you want, you can tap on the title of the story, and it'll open the Safari View Controller standard web view. And then you can, from there, if you want, you can either use the standard web page look, or you can switch to Safari Reader. So that's also an option. But the second thing that I love, which is why I keep saying that it's disappointing to see that Safari Reading List has gotten no attention in the past 6 years and even more. Reader has excellent integration with shortcuts in iOS 13.
Right.
It's using the new shortcuts parameters API to let you retrieve articles from Reader as well as reopening them in the app. So there's a bunch of actions that you can check out in Reader for iOS in shortcuts. One of them that I will mention is only available in the beta for now. I'm on the test flight and it's in there. That's version 4.2.2, but on the App Store. At the moment of recording this, so this is the day before Thanksgiving, it's Wednesday, the latest version is still 4.2.1. So hopefully Silvio Rizzi will release the next version soon. Basically, what you can do is you can get, for example, a list of all your unread stories from Reader inside shortcuts.
Okay.
You can just say get unread items from Reader. Then you say choose from list. You choose from a list of titles. And then in the next version of the app, you will have open article in Reader. And it'll reopen that specific article you just selected in Reader. This is a 3-step shortcut, super easy to put together, that presents you with a quick list of articles that you have saved in Reader, and it'll open one for you in the app. You can use it from a widget. Like, you don't want to open Reader, you're in the mood for something to read, you can just swipe over to the widget, run the shortcut, choose an article, and go. And once you understand, like, this is what Reader is doing here is it's taking the read later database, like all the articles that you've saved, it's exposing them to shortcuts, and it's giving you tools to do whatever you want with them. Like, maybe you want to open a random article from your backlog because you don't know what to choose, you just want to get something random. What you do is you just get articles from Reader, get random item from list, which is a native action in shortcuts, open item. And that's it. And you have a shortcut that lets you read a random article from your backlog. But you can go even beyond that. So you can save articles to Reader using a custom shortcut. There's an action to add something to your queue. If perhaps for some reason you don't want to use the native Reader extension, you can put together a custom shortcut for that. You can also get the full HTML content of an article. I don't know why you would do this,
right?
But the what Reader passes back to shortcuts is a custom data type. It's called the Reader article, and the Reader article has a bunch of properties. When you tap on the variable in shortcuts, you will see all of them, and one of them is the full contents of a story. It's HTML, so you can convert it to rich text, or you can convert it back to Markdown if you want. You can do whatever you want. I guess you can print a Reader article to PDF with shortcuts.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's one thing I could see using. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an option. There's a bunch of things that I would still like to see. Like, this is an amazing shortcuts integration. It is exactly the kind of thing that I was hoping developers could do for iOS 13. Like, the idea of fetching an entire database from the app and giving it to you in shortcuts with multiple properties to choose from, like, that's incredible. But also, I would love to see even more. Like, I want to get more properties. Like, give me the author name of a story so that I could do something like show me all articles by John Voorhees, something like that. So even more properties. Date published could be another. So, like, give me stories that I saved 3 months ago. But I feel like, and I mentioned the show article in Reader action is coming soon, hopefully. But yeah, I feel like this is exactly the kind of thing that I've always wanted Apple to do in Safari Reading List, but they haven't. And at this point, I don't know if they ever will. But with Reader, I get the same benefits. I can save things from anywhere, and they sync in the background. They download in the background, thanks to CloudKit. But I also get proper organization in the app, and I get shortcuts.
Yeah, you've got me thinking, especially if there was the date published thing, I could have a shortcut where I looked at the articles I've saved for the past week, get the list, tick off all the ones that I want to put in the newsletter, and then
Right.
using the Trello API, send them automatically to our Trello board where we keep all of our weekly links that are going to go into the newsletter. I mean, that would be really nice. I could do that now, I guess. I couldn't do it by publication date. I could just kind of go through whatever list I happen to have at any given time. That's really cool. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Kensington, the people who make universal docking stations that are designed to increase productivity. You can get access to more ports and make your sleek MacBook, Chromebook, or other laptop as powerful as a desktop. It's plug and play with no drivers, so you can enjoy up to dual 4K displays with HDMI and display-linked video connectors, plus USB 3.0, USB-C, and Thunderbolt 3 with power delivery available. The Kensington engineering team has 3 decades of experience in high-volume manufacturing and hardware IT products. Plus, rigorous test cycles and quality control means all their products are tested above industry standards. If you're an IT decision maker looking to find the right docking solutions for your organization, check out Kensington's Pro Concierge program and test drive a docking solution today. Visit kensington.com/appstories right now to check out Kensington. That's kensington.com/appstories to learn more about Kensington's docking stations. Our thanks to Kensington for their support of the show.
I mean, in my dream scenario, reading list should be an app, but I can see why Apple doesn't want to make any more apps. But even as a Safari feature, like, give it some love, Apple. Give it a custom view, give it search capabilities or folders, this crazy idea, right? But even just automatically sorting your articles as an option by website. I feel like that would be an incredible addition to reading list. And then, it is surprising because Safari has excellent integration with shortcuts. The Safari and shortcuts teams at Apple, they work together. They've done some incredible things like running JavaScript on web pages with shortcuts. Like, that's wild. Why haven't they done anything for reading list? That's surprising to me. So hopefully they will.
It is a little surprising, although if you recall, back in the day, RSS was built into Safari too.
Yeah, and then it was removed.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope
what are you implying here?
I hope that's not where we're heading with reading list, because I like it too. But you're right; it doesn't have the set of tools that you can get with something like Reader, which I just absolutely love. So that if you haven't tried Reader in a while, I would really suggest giving it a try, because it really is a fantastic app on both platforms, and it's really allowed me to consolidate my reading into one place in a way that really I've never done before, because I always had some piece of the puzzle that was in some sort of outline application, whether it was a read later service or Twitter or something else, and now I've really got everything in one place, which is just making my life a little bit easier and enjoyable. And the reading experience too, with the way you can customize how things look, makes for a good reading experience too. So I enjoy that aspect of it as well. All right, Federico, we have actually one last thing we need to share with listeners, which is a really great deal. And we just announced it not long ago on Mac Stories. Today is the last day to take advantage of this. Why don't you explain what the deal is?
Yeah, so our Mac Stories shortcuts icons are icon set of 350 custom icons for shortcuts that you add to your home screen. They are on sale for Black Friday and Cyber Monday for 50% off. So half the usual pricing. We really wanted, so Sylvia, she designed the icons. We launched them a couple of months ago, and we have a page up on Mac Stories. Ryan did a story on how he rethought his iPad home screen thanks to these icons. Also, thanks to these icons, I'm still in the process of rethinking my iPhone home screen and my iPad home screen with these icons. So the idea would be that you can add shortcuts to your home screen. Those shortcuts are so much better in iOS 13, but with our icon set, you can go beyond the options for icons that you get in the Shortcuts app. And Silvia, she designed 350 custom glyphs that you can use when you add a shortcut to the home screen. And what's really particular about the Mac Stories shortcuts icons is that they keep the original color of your shortcut. So if you have a shortcut that in the library has an orange color and you use a Mac Stories shortcut icon, it'll keep the orange background, but it'll just use a custom white glyph on top of it. So usually the icons are on sale at $14.99 US. And with this offer, 50% off, you can get them at $7.49. So the exact half. There's a promo code that you can use for this. So there will be a link in the show notes that takes you to the article on Mac Stories with the details. You can also use promo code BFIcons19, that's 19 as a number, to get a checkout. Use the promo code and you'll get the discount at 50% off. The deal expires today, this evening at midnight New York Eastern Time. So you have the full day. If you're based in the US, you have basically the full day to get them. And if you're based in Europe, you have until the very early morning of Tuesday, I suppose.
Right.
So yeah, take advantage of that. Silvia and I are just so incredibly thankful for the response to the icons since we launched them in September. And we thought, it'll be nice for Black Friday if we can do an offer so that even more people can afford to get the icons and put together better, more powerful home screens. So we did that.
Yeah, that's great. Everybody should definitely check this out. Remember, the deal expires today. If you're listening to this on Monday, December 2nd, it expires at midnight New York time, Eastern US time. So Go check them out. I absolutely love these. Sylvia's incredibly talented and she did an amazing job. And I've been using them myself. Check out the links in the show notes and use the promo code that Federico told you about. Okay, Federico, I think that's a great place to stop for today. I want to thank our three sponsors again. That's Luna Display, Mac Stadium, and Kensington. Of course, you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net and over on Twitter and Instagram. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.